The autumn wind nipped at my face as I went through the back door of Rosie's diner. My 12-hour shift was finally over. My feet ached something fierce in the cheap sneakers I'd bought on clearance last month, already starting to wear thin at the heels. The alley behind the diner reeked of fryer grease and old garbage. It was a familiar smell after 3 years of working there. "See you tomorrow, Ellie," Marco called from the kitchen, his voice almost lost in the clatter of dishes. I waved without looking back, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. November in Chicago was brutal, and I couldn't afford a new coat until maybe the next paycheck. The tips had been crummy tonight, just $18 for a whole shift of plastered-on smiles. "Can I get you anything else, hon?" The streetlights flickered as I turned onto Westfield Avenue, casting long, stretched-out shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Most of the stores were closed up tight at this hour, almost midnight, their windows dark except for the 24-hour pharmacy on the corner. I would have taken the bus if I could have, but the last one ran at 11:30, and I couldn't afford to leave work early. The 20-minute walk home was just another tax on being poor. I was mentally figuring out how much of tomorrow's lunch I could skip to save up for winter boots when I saw her. A small figure huddled on the sidewalk ahead, kind of hidden between a parked car and a mailbox. At first, I thought it might be a discarded bag of clothes. But then I saw a flash of red. A little red coat with gold buttons. Way too nice for this neighborhood. "Hey!" I called out, picking up the pace. "Are you okay?" No answer. As I got closer, my stomach dropped like a rock. It was a kid, a little girl with dark braids, lying still as could be on the cold concrete. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing a spotless private school uniform under that fancy coat. "Oh my God!" I rushed to her side, kneeling down on the pavement. "Sweetie, can you hear me?" Her skin felt cool to the touch, but she was breathing, thank goodness. I gently turned her onto her back, checking for any obvious injuries, but didn't see anything. She'd just collapsed, it looked like. What's a little kid like this doing out here alone on the street at midnight? "Hey, little one," I said, gently tapping her cheek. "Can you wake up?" Her eyelids fluttered a little, but she didn't open her eyes. I looked around, desperate. The street was empty. The pharmacy was the only thing open, but it was still 3 blocks away. "I need to get you help," I mumbled, not even sure if she could hear me. That's when I noticed a glint of something in her coat pocket. A phone. I hesitated for a split second before pulling it out. It was the newest model, the kind I could never afford, with a case covered in tiny rhinestones. The screen was locked, but I saw an emergency contact button at the bottom. When I pressed it, only one contact showed up. "Papa." No name, just that single word. With shaky fingers, I hit the call button. It rang just once before someone answered. "Isabella." The voice that came through the speaker was deep and accented. Italian, maybe, but mostly it just sounded like pure authority. Not loud, not pushy, just in charge. "Isabella, where are you? You were supposed to be home an hour ago." This isn't Isabella," I said, my voice shaking a little. "My name is Ellie. I found a little girl passed out on the sidewalk on Westfield Avenue near Rosie's diner. I think this is her father's number." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. "Is she breathing?" The calm in his voice had turned into something else, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up straight. "Yes, she's breathing, but she's unconscious. I was going to call an ambulance, but no ambulance." The words sliced through mine like a razor. "No police. Do not move her. I'm coming. Stay exactly where you are." "But she needs medical." "I'm bringing a doctor. Do not move. Do not call anyone else." Before I could say anything else, he spoke again, his voice a little muffled, like he'd turned away from the phone. "Get the car now and call Dr. Michaels." Then back to me, his voice sharp and precise as a blade. "Exactly where?" "On Westfield, about a block east of Rosie's diner, near the old bookstore, the one that went out of business. We're between a blue sedan and a mailbox." 7 minutes, he said. "Keep her warm. If anyone comes near you, call me back immediately." The line went dead. I sat there stunned, the phone still pressed to my ear. What kind of father forbids calling an ambulance for his unconscious kid? And the power in his voice. My mind flashed back to those true crime shows my roommate Jen was always watching, about guys who spoke softly and carried big sticks. But I didn't have a lot of options. The little girl, Isabella, he'd called her, was still out cold, her breathing shallow. I took off my jacket and put it over her, even though it wasn't much warmer than the night air. As I did, I saw a thin gold bracelet around her wrist, engraved with her name and what looked like a family crest. The minutes ticked by, agonizingly slow. I kept one hand on Isabella's wrist, checking her pulse, while constantly looking at the time on her phone. What had happened to her? She didn't smell like booze, and she seemed too young for drugs. Could it be some kind of medical problem? At exactly 6 minutes and 40 seconds after the call ended, headlights appeared around the corner. Not the yellow headlights of a normal car, but the bright white glare of those pricey LEDs. A black SUV with tinted windows crept down the street, moving with deliberate slowness like a predator looking for prey. Pulled up right in front of us, tires crunching on broken glass. The engine shut off and the night went silent again. The back door opened first, and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored overcoat that probably cost more than 6 months' worth of rent. But it wasn't his clothes that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the sheer force of his presence, the way it felt like space itself was bending around him, like he carried his own personal gravity. He moved with calculated control, his eyes sweeping the street before settling on me with laser focus. They were dark, almost black in the dim light, set in a face that could have been handsome if it wasn't so terrifying in its intensity. A scar ran along his right jawline, thin and precise, like it had been put there on purpose. He wasn't alone. The driver's door opened, and a mountain of a man got out, scanning the area around us with practiced ease. From the passenger side, a third man emerged, carrying something that looked like a doctor's bag, but I barely even noticed them. My whole attention was locked on the man in the overcoat as he came closer, his steps making no sound even though he was so big. "Isabella," he said, and the name sounded different coming from him, reverent almost. He knelt down beside us, not even seeming to care that his expensive pants were touching the dirty sidewalk. Up close, I caught his scent, something subtle and masculine. Sandalwood. Maybe mixed with a metallic smell that I somehow knew came from a gun hidden under that perfect coat. I found her like this. I stammered. She hasn't woken up. His eyes flicked to mine for just a second, and I felt completely exposed, like he'd seen everything about me in that one quick look. My worn-out waitress uniform showing under my thin jacket, my cheap shoes, the exhaustion etched on my face. "The doctor will examine her," he said, nodding to the man with the bag, who immediately knelt down on Isabella's other side. While the doctor worked, the father stayed perfectly still, watching his daughter's face with this frightening intensity. The scar on his jaw seemed to turn white as he clenched his teeth. "Sir," the doctor said after a moment, "her glucose levels are dangerously low. It's her diabetes. I need to administer." Before he could finish, the father had already reached inside his coat and pulled out a small case, which he handed to the doctor. The medical man worked fast, preparing an injection that he gave with practiced skill. Almost right away, color started to come back to Isabella's cheeks. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened all the way. For a second, she looked confused. Then her eyes found her father. "Papa," she whispered. "I'm sorry, I forgot to eat after ballet." The change on the man's face was amazing. All the hardness melted away, replaced by relief so deep it was almost painful to watch. "Isabella," he said again, gathering her small body close to his chest with gentle hands that I just knew were capable of terrible things. "You scared me, Piccolamia." The little girl's arms went around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. "I wanted to walk home by myself, like a big girl. Sophia's mom lets her walk home alone. Sophia's father isn't." He stopped himself, glancing at me. "We will discuss this later." He stood up in one smooth motion, lifting Isabella like she weighed nothing. That's when his eyes met mine again. More deliberate this time, looking me over with this unsettling thoroughness. "You found my daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, I was walking home from work. And your name is Ellie." "Eleanor, actually. Eleanor Walsh, but everyone calls me Ellie." His eyes narrowed a little. "You work at the diner?" "Yes, for 3 years now." He seemed to be making a decision, figuring something out in his head. Then he reached into his pocket and held out his hand to me. I flinched without thinking, which made something dangerous flash across his face. "Your jacket," he said. I looked down, suddenly remembering my thin jacket still lying on the sidewalk where Isabella had been. I picked it up, dusting it off awkwardly. "Thank you for helping my daughter, Eleanor Walsh," he said, my full name sounding perfect coming from him. "I do not forget such debts." It wasn't, anyone would have. Few would have stopped. Fewer would have stayed. He shifted Isabella in his arms, and her eyes were closed again, her breathing steady. "And you did not call the authorities, as I instructed." The way he said it made it clear that this was important, that I had passed some kind of test I didn't even know I was taking. "Your car is here," he said abruptly, nodding toward the SUV. "My driver will take you home." "Oh, that's not necessary. I only live a few blocks." It was not an offer. His tone stayed polite, but the finality in it was unmistakable. Before I could say anything else, the large driver had moved next to me, gesturing toward the vehicle with a politeness that felt totally unyielding. As the father turned to carry Isabella to the car, I saw something I'd missed before, the outline of a shoulder holster just for a second as his coat moved. My stomach clenched. The complete command in his voice, the guys who moved like shadows, the gun, the luxury, the quiet threat that seemed to radiate from him. All of a sudden, I knew exactly what kind of man had just put himself in my debt. And as I let myself be led to the waiting SUV, a terrible certainty settled over me. My life had just changed forever, and I had no idea what that would mean. The SUV's inside smelled like leather and something faintly metallic. I sat stiffly on the edge of the seat, hands clenched tight around my worn-out purse as the driver took us through the empty streets with practiced skill. In the middle seat, the father held Isabella close to him, murmuring something in Italian every now and then while the doctor kept an eye on her. Nobody had asked me for my address, but somehow we were headed right for my apartment building. "The Parkview Apartments, correct?" The driver's voice startled me, the first words anyone had said since we got in the car. "Yes," I answered, trying to hide how uneasy I felt. "Third floor, apartment 3C? The father interrupted, not even looking up from his daughter. "Shared with Jennifer Reyes, waitress at the Golden Crown Casino. Your lease expires in 3 months. A cold wave washed over me. My mouth opened, then closed, and I couldn't say anything. "I make it my business to know things, Eleanor Walsh," he went on, finally looking up at me. In the dim light from the streetlights, his eyes looked almost completely black. "Knowledge is survival." The car slowed down in front of my building, a crumbling brick place with security bars on the first-floor windows and a front door that never really locked right. The difference between my rundown home and the shiny car couldn't have been more obvious. The driver got out and opened my door with the formality of a chauffeur serving royalty. As I stepped out, the father's window went down. "Tomorrow," he said, "someone will come for you at the diner, when your shift ends." It wasn't a request. "I have classes on Tuesday mornings," I said, finding my voice. "I'm studying nursing at the community college, and I can't miss them. Your professors have been told that you're helping with a family emergency. Your absence has been excused for the week." My breath caught in my throat. "The week? I don't understand. Why would you?" "Isabella wishes to thank you properly." His face softened a little when he talked about his daughter, but then hardened again as he added, "And I still have questions about tonight." The window started to go up. "Wait," I called out, taking a step forward. "I don't even know your name." The window stopped halfway down. "Salvatore," he said after a second. "Salvatore Russo." Then the glass closed all the way, and the SUV drove off, leaving me alone on the sidewalk with a name that seemed to weigh heavy in the night air. I barely slept. The name Salvatore Russo tumbled around in my head like a rock in a dryer, keeping me awake until dawn peeked through the thin curtains. Around 6, I finally gave up and reached for my laptop, hesitating only for a second before typing his name into the search bar. The results made my blood run cold. Most of the articles were in Italian, but the English ones told me enough. Salvatore Russo, suspected head of one of Chicago's most powerful remaining crime families, investigated for everything from racketeering to murder, but never convicted. Witnesses had a habit of changing their stories or just disappearing. His legitimate businesses included shipping, real estate, and a chain of high-end restaurants all over the city. And now, somehow, I had gotten his attention. I closed my laptop and rubbed my eyes hard. What had I gotten myself into just by being kind to a sick little girl on the street? Rough night? Jen asked, coming out of her bedroom already dressed in her casino uniform. Her makeup was perfect, even though it was so early. You could say that. I hesitated for a second. Jen, have you ever heard of someone named Salvatore Russo? She froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Why are you asking about Sal Russo? The fact that she called him Sal wasn't lost on me. You know him? Of him? She corrected quickly. Everyone at the casino knows who he is. He owns half the lakefront properties and has fingers in most of the gambling operations. She set her mug down carefully. Ellie, why are you asking about him? I gave her the short version of the story. Finding Isabella, calling her father, finding out who he was. Jesus Christ, she whispered when I was done. And he's sending someone to pick you up tonight? I nodded. Listen to me very carefully. Jen gripped my shoulders, her fake nails digging in a little. Be respectful. Do exactly what you're told. Don't ask questions. Don't mention anything you might have read about him. Her eyes were wide with real fear. These people don't play games, Ellie. You're scaring me, I said, trying to laugh it off. Good, she replied, not smiling at all. You should be scared. My shift at the diner dragged on forever. Every time the bell over the door jingled, I jumped, my heart pounding. By 7, I was so jumpy that I dropped a whole tray of drinks when a customer's phone rang out of the blue. You okay, honey? Rosie asked as I cleaned up the mess, my hands shaking. You're jumpy as a cat today. Fine, I lied. Just didn't sleep well. At exactly 8 o'clock, just as I was taking off my apron, the bell chimed one last time. A different driver than last night came in, younger, but with the same watchful eyes, scanning the room before stopping on me. Miss Walsh, he said with a small nod. The car is waiting. Rosie raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything as I grabbed my stuff. I followed the driver outside, where a different black SUV was idling at the curb. This time, there was no little girl inside, no doctor, just an empty leather seat and my racing heart. We drove in silence, leaving my familiar neighborhood behind and heading north toward the glittering lakefront. The buildings got newer, the streets got cleaner, until we pulled through a gate into a private driveway lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. At the end stood this huge stone mansion, its windows glowing warm against the evening darkness. 2 guys in dark suits stood by the front door, standing at attention. They nodded to the driver as he opened my door, their eyes following my every move, professional and detached. This way, Miss Walsh, one of them said, pointing toward these huge double doors. Inside was a foyer so big it could have swallowed my whole apartment. Marble floors, really high ceilings, artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. I hugged my purse to my side, super aware of my waitress uniform and scuffed shoes. Eleanor. The voice was high and sweet. Isabella came hurrying down a grand staircase with a bright smile. She looked like a different kid from the pale, unconscious girl I'd found on the sidewalk. Her dark hair was braided neatly, and she was wearing what looked like silk pajamas under a fluffy robe. You came, she exclaimed, stopping right before she got to me, suddenly shy. Of course, I said, smiling even though I was so nervous. How are you feeling? Much better. Dr. Michael said I was very silly to skip my snack after ballet. She rolled her eyes dramatically. But Papa said, "You're my guardian angel." So, everything worked out okay. Before I could answer, I heard footsteps echoing on the marble. Deliberate, measured steps that I somehow already knew. Salvatore Russo appeared from a hallway to the right, now dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark pants. His sleeves rolled up to his elbows, showing off strong forearms and the edge of what looked like a tattoo. In the bright light of the foyer, I could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe in his mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw marked by that precise scar. His hair was dark, cut short on the sides but longer on top. And his eyes, those eyes that had looked black in the darkness, were actually a deep, intense brown. "Isabella," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "What did we discuss about running in the house?" She hung her head. "Sorry, Papa." He put a hand on her shoulder, then looked at me. "I see you've met your savior again." "I'm hardly," I started. "Modesty is admirable, but unnecessary." He cut me off. "If not for you, my daughter might still be lying on that sidewalk." Something dark flashed across his face. Or worse. Isabella tugged on his hand. "Can I show her my room, Papa? Please? I want to show her my science project." He checked his watch, a timepiece that probably cost more than I made in a year. 20 minutes. Then it's time for bed. He turned his gaze to me, after which Miss Walsh and I will talk. The way he said talk sent a shiver down my spine. Isabella led me up the staircase, chattering excitedly about school and her friends, and how her science project on ecosystems had won first prize. I followed, grateful for the escape from her father's intensity, but super aware of his eyes following us as we went up. Her bedroom was as big as my whole apartment, decorated in shades of lilac and silver. Bookshelves covered one wall, filled with books way beyond what an 8-year-old would normally read. A big desk had a computer setup that would make any tech executive jealous. "This is Sophia," she said, pointing to a photo of herself with another girl. "Her mom lets her walk home alone, but Papa says I'm not allowed because of who he is." She frowned a little. "What does that mean exactly?" "Papa never explains." I chose my words carefully. "I think it means your dad is an important man, and important men sometimes have people who don't like them because of business." She nodded seriously. "That's what he says too, but he never talks about his business." She showed me her science project, a really detailed model of a rainforest ecosystem, and I made impressed noises while trying to reconcile this normal, bright kid with the dangerous world she lived in. Exactly 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. A woman in what looked like a nurse's uniform came in. "Time for bed, Mrs. Isabella," she said with a slight accent. "Eastern European, maybe." "But Sophia, your father was very clear." The woman's voice was kind but firm. "And you need your rest after yesterday's little episode." Isabella sighed dramatically but didn't argue anymore. She turned to me with a smile that lit up her whole face. "Thank you for finding me, Eleanor. Papa says we're in your debt forever now." The word forever hung in the air, heavy. As the nurse led me back to the hallway, a different security guy was waiting there, gesturing for me to follow him back downstairs and through a bunch of hallways. We stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. The guy knocked once, then opened it without waiting for an answer. "Miss Walsh, sir," he announced, then stepped aside for me to go in. The room was a study, lined with books and dominated by a huge desk. Behind it stood Salvatore, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. A fire was crackling in a stone fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the rich wood paneling. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a leather chair in front of the desk. I perched on the edge of it, hands folded in my lap so they wouldn't shake. He put one of the glasses in front of me, then walked around the desk to lean against the front of it, looming over me with the easy confidence of a man who's used to intimidating people. "You seem nervous, Eleanor," he said, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Why?" "I think you know why," I replied, surprised at how bold I sounded. A faint smile touched his lips. Because you've been looking me up online. It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. Let me save you further Google searches, he said, taking a sip of his drink. Yes, I am who they say I am. Yes, I do what they say I do. And yes, by helping Isabella, you have gotten involved with a man most people try to stay away from. My mouth went dry. I didn't help her to get anything out of it, which is exactly why this debt weighs so heavily, he said. He set his glass down and leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, Eleanor Walsh. What does a woman with your intelligence do working in a diner and living in that neighborhood? The question caught me completely off guard. I'm putting myself through nursing school. The diner has flexible hours, and the apartment is what I can afford. Laudable, he said, studying me intently. And your parents? My mother died when I was 14. Cancer. My father wasn't in the picture. Something shifted in his expression. A brief softening. So, you've been on your own since then? I nodded. As was I, he said quietly, more to himself than to me, then more directly. I have a proposition for you, Eleanor. My pulse jumped. Mr. Russo. Salvatore, he corrected. Or Sal, if you prefer. Salvatore? I repeated, the name feeling strange in my mouth. Whatever you're thinking. I'm not, he interrupted. Isabella needs a companion. Someone to monitor her health, ensure she takes her medications, follows her diet. The school nurse does this during class hours, but there are gaps in coverage. After school, evenings when I'm working. I blinked. You want me to be her babysitter? His expression hardened. I want you to be her medical monitor. You're studying nursing. This position would pay 4 times what you make at that diner, plus room and board here in the house. My mind reeled. I couldn't possibly live here. My classes, my roommate. Your classes can be attended from here. We're 10 minutes from your campus. As for your roommate, he shrugged. Her rent will be covered until she finds a new arrangement. The casual way he dismissed my entire life made anger flare beneath my fear. You can't just rearrange my existence because I happen to help your daughter. I can, he said simply. And I am. Why me? You could hire an actual nurse. Because Isabella trusts you. He picked up his glass again, studying me over the rim. And because I saw how you looked at her last night, not as the daughter of Salvatore Russo, but as a child who needed help. That is uncommon in my world. I swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I would be disappointed. He let that hang in the air for a moment. But I would not force you. Contrary to what you may have read, I do not make a habit of coercion. Somehow I doubted that very much. However, he continued, before you refuse, consider this. The position comes with full coverage of your remaining tuition and guaranteed placement at Northwestern Memorial after graduation. His eyes held mine. I believe that was your goal. Yes, the position you've been applying for without success. My breath caught. How could he possibly know that knowledge is survival? He repeated his words from last night. I stared at the untouched drink before me, mind racing. The offer was impossible, outrageous, and yet the solution to every financial problem that had kept me awake at night for years. Complete my degree debt-free, secure the job I dreamed of, all while earning more money than I'd ever had. All I had to do was move into the home of a man who terrified me. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. He straightened, moving back behind his desk. You have until tomorrow evening. One of my drivers will collect you after your shift. I rose on unsteady legs, sensing the dismissal. One more thing, Eleanor, he said as I reached the door. When I turned, his expression was deadly serious. While you consider my offer, remember this. If you accept, you will be under my protection. If you refuse, we will never speak again, and you will go back to your life as it was. His eyes locked with mine, and in them, I saw something beyond the danger and the power, something almost vulnerable. But know this, he added softly. Once you enter my world, there is no easy way out, so choose carefully. As the driver took me home through the glittering Chicago night, those words echoed in my mind. I was standing at a crossroads, and whatever I chose would irrevocably alter the course of my life. The question was which path led to freedom, and which to a gilded cage. Dawn found me still awake, curled on our threadbare couch with a cold cup of coffee clutched in my hands. I'd spent the night making lists, pros and cons of Salvatore's offer, rational reasons to accept or refuse, but rationality seemed inadequate when weighing a decision that felt more like stepping off a cliff than choosing a job. "You're seriously considering this?" Jen stood in the kitchen doorway, hair disheveled from sleep, eyes wide with disbelief after I'd explained Salvatore's proposition. "The money alone would change everything," I said. "No more double shifts. No more choosing between textbooks and groceries and a guaranteed position at Northwestern after graduation. Do you know how many people fight for those spots? And all you have to do is move in with Chicago's most dangerous crime lord." Jen's voice dripped sarcasm. "Totally worth it." "He's not." I stopped myself. We both knew that was exactly what he was. "Ellie." Jen sat beside me, taking my hands in hers. "These people don't just let you walk away when you're done. Once you're in their world, you know things, see things. You become a liability." He said I'd be under his protection. "And that doesn't scare you even more? What happens if that protection ever gets withdrawn?" I had no answer for that. Jen sighed, squeezing my hands. "Look, I get it. It's a golden ticket, but there's always a price tag, and with guys like Russo, that price might be more than you're prepared to pay." Her words followed me to the diner, hovering like a shadow as I mechanically filled coffee cups and took orders. Rosie noticed my distraction, sending concerned glances whenever I stared too long at nothing or jumped at sudden noises. "Whatever's eating you, honey, it can't be that bad," she said during my break, sliding a plate of pie across the table. "Talk to old Rosie." I managed to smile. "Just a big decision to make about that man who picked you up yesterday." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't think I didn't notice that fancy car or the way you turned white as a ghost when he walked in. It's complicated." I hedged. "Complicated usually means trouble," she said, patting my hand. "And trouble in nice clothes is still trouble." As my shift wound down, the knot in my stomach tightened. Every time the door opened, I expected to see Salvatore's driver. When my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number at 7:45, I nearly dropped it. "Astra's car will arrive at 8:15. Your decision is expected. A star." 15 minutes later than yesterday. Was he giving me extra time or simply busy? Either way, the small reprieve did nothing to settle my racing thoughts. At 8:10, I hung up my apron and gathered my things. Rosie watched me with concern. "Whatever you're getting yourself into, Ellie, be careful," she said. "Some ships aren't meant to be boarded, if you catch my drift." I hugged her impulsively. "I'll be okay, Rosie." "You better be," she replied gruffly. "I still need you on the breakfast shift Monday." Outside, the air had turned colder, threatening rain. I paced the sidewalk, still undecided, heart pounding as the minutes ticked by. A black SUV appeared at precisely 8:15, gliding to a stop before me. The window lowered, revealing not a driver, but Salvatore himself behind the wheel. No security visible, just him. An intimacy that felt more unsettling than a cadre of armed men. "Get in," he said, unlocking the passenger door. I hesitated only briefly before complying. The interior smelled of his cologne, subtle and expensive. "I thought you'd send a driver," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "Some conversations require privacy." He pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. "Have you decided?" I looked at my hands, at the small burn on my wrist from a splash of hot coffee this morning, at the chipped polish on my nails that I never had time to fix properly, symbols of a life lived on the edge of constant exhaustion. "Before I answer," I said carefully, "I need to understand what I'd be walking into, not just the job but your world." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What specifically concerns you?" "Violence," I said bluntly. "Illegal activities. Things I might witness that would make me complicit." He drove in silence for a moment, turning down Lakeshore Drive, where the dark water reflected the city lights. "My home is separate from my business," Eleanor. What happens in one does not spill into the other. But Isabella will never be exposed to certain realities, he continued, cutting me off. And by extension, neither would you. Your duties would be limited to her care and companionship. I wasn't convinced. And the men with guns, the doctors who make house calls in the middle of the night and don't report diabetic emergencies, those realities are already in your home. A muscle flexed in his jaw. Security is necessary. As for Dr. Michaels, he is Isabella's private physician. There are aspects of my life that require discretion. That's exactly what worries me. He pulled the car to the side of the road, suddenly cutting the engine. When he turned to face me, his expression was deadly serious. Let me be absolutely clear, Eleanor. I will never ask you to participate in, witness, or conceal anything illegal as part of your duties with Isabella. Your position would be legitimate in every sense, with proper taxation, benefits, and documentation. What I do outside my home is my concern, not yours. His intensity should have frightened me, but instead, I found myself believing him, not because I trusted him, but because I sensed protecting Isabella from his world was perhaps the one principle he held sacred. And when I finish my degree, I asked, you leave with a letter of recommendation and connections that will open any door in Chicago's medical community. His expression softened slightly. And Isabella will have had the benefit of your care during an important period of her development. I took a deep breath. I have conditions. Something like surprise flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by amusement. Do you? Yes. First, I need 1 day off each week to maintain my own life. See friends, go to my apartment, just exist outside your world. Second, I need a written contract spelling out exactly what you just promised. And third, I hesitated, then forged ahead. If I ever feel unsafe, I can leave immediately. No questions asked, no consequences. He studied me for a long moment. Your first 2 conditions are reasonable. Your third, his voice hardened, shows you still don't understand what it means to have my protection. If you ever felt unsafe in my home, the threat would be eliminated, not you. A chill ran down my spine at the casual way he spoke of eliminating threats. But there was something else in his words. A fierce protectiveness that extended beyond his daughter to anyone under his care. So, he prompted, your decision? I closed my eyes briefly, then met his gaze directly. I accept. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. Good. He started the car again, merging smoothly back onto Lakeshore Drive. We drove in silence for several minutes before I realized we weren't heading toward his mansion or my apartment. Where are we going? I asked. To settle your affairs, he replied. I assume you'll need to pack your belongings, inform your roommate, resign from the diner. Tonight, I stammered. But You begin tomorrow, he said as if this were perfectly reasonable. Isabella has ballet from 9 to 11. You'll accompany her, monitoring her glucose levels throughout. I've had a packet prepared with her medical history, treatment protocols, and emergency contacts. The methodical efficiency of it all left me speechless. He'd been so confident I'd accept that he'd already planned my first day. I haven't even given notice at the diner, I protested. Already handled. Rosie received an offer this afternoon to cover your remaining shifts at triple the usual rate, plus a consulting fee for menu development at one of my restaurants. He glanced at me. She agreed quite readily. Indignation flared. You had no right to. Would you prefer to work your 2-week notice while also caring for Isabella? He asked calmly. I merely expedited an inevitable transition. Put that way, it made practical sense. But the high-handed manner still rankled. And what about my classes? My teaching assistants won't just accept that I'm suddenly doing everything remotely. Your professors have been informed that you've received a prestigious private nursing position that includes educational accommodation. He changed lanes effortlessly. Northwestern Medical is very supportive of the arrangement, especially after my recent donation to their pediatric research department. I stared at him, a mixture of awe and horror washing over me. Is there anything you can't simply arrange to your liking? His expression darkened momentarily. Many things, Eleanor. far more than you might imagine. We pulled up to my apartment building, but instead of stopping, he drove into the small parking lot behind it, a space usually reserved for residents who could afford the extra fee. "I'll come up with you," he said, killing the engine. "That's not necessary," I replied quickly. The thought of Salvatore Russo in my tiny, shabby apartment made my stomach clench with embarrassment. "It is," he countered. "We need to discuss logistics, and I prefer not to do so in a vehicle." Before I could protest further, he was out of the car and opening my door. I led him reluctantly into the building, hyper-aware of his presence behind me as we climbed the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been temporarily out of service for the past 8 months. Jen was home, sprawled on the couch watching reality TV. She looked up as we entered, her expression morphing from casual interest to shock when she saw Salvatore. "Holy shit," she whispered, scrambling to her feet. Hello, sir." The sir made Salvatore's mouth twitch slightly. "Miss Reyes," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "I understand you work at the Golden Crown." "Yes, sir," she replied, shooting me a wide-eyed look. 5 years now. Victor Mendez speaks highly of your skills at the blackjack table." Jen blinked rapidly. Victor was the casino manager, 3 levels above her direct supervisor. "I thank you, sir. Eleanor will be coming to work for me," Salvatore continued smoothly. "Which leaves you in need of a new roommate or a new living arrangement." Jen swallowed visibly. "I've been thinking about moving closer to the casino anyway." "Excellent. I've taken the liberty of arranging viewings for 3 apartments tomorrow. All within your budget, all with improved security." He produced a card from his pocket, handing it to her. "My assistant will contact you with details." Jen took the card with slightly trembling fingers. "That's very thoughtful." He nodded, then turned to me. "You should pack what you'll need immediately. The rest can be moved tomorrow." I found my voice at last. "You can't just reorganize our lives like this. Jen might not want to move, and I might need more than an hour to pack up my entire existence." Something dangerous flashed in Salvatore's eyes, the first real glimpse I'd had of the man beneath the polished exterior. "Time is a luxury I rarely waste, Eleanor. Efficiency is not tyranny." "It kind of is when you don't give people choices," I countered. Jen made a small choking sound, her eyes darting between us in horror. To my surprise, Salvatore's expression softened into something almost like respect. "Very well, Miss Reyes. Do you object to the apartment viewings tomorrow? You're welcome to decline." Jen shook her head quickly. "No objections. Thank you for the opportunity." "And you?" He turned back to me. "How much time would you prefer for packing?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected anger, not accommodation. "The weekend would be helpful. I have things to sort through, arrangements to make." "You may have until Sunday evening," he conceded. "However, you begin work tomorrow as planned. A driver will collect you at 8 a.m. It was a compromise, if a minimal one. I nodded my agreement. "Good," he said, checking his watch. "I'll wait while you pack what you need for the next few days." I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door behind me with relief. My hands shook as I pulled clothes from drawers, toiletries from my bathroom caddy, textbooks from my desk. Through the thin walls, I could hear the low murmur of Salvatore's voice, then Jen's higher, nervous responses. What had I gotten myself into? 20 minutes later, I emerged with a duffel bag and backpack. Jen sat alone on the couch, looking shell-shocked. "He went to take a call," she said, nodding toward the hallway. "Ellie, that man is—" She trailed off, seemingly unable to find adequate words. "I know," I replied. "Are you really okay with all this? Are you kidding?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "The apartments he's having me look at are in River North. I could never afford that neighborhood on my own, but apparently, the subsidized rate he's arranged is less than what I pay for this dump. That doesn't bother you being managed like this?" Jen shrugged. "I've seen how guys like him operate at the casino. They like control and they're willing to pay for it." She gave me an appraising look. "Just be careful you know what you're really being paid for." Before I could respond, The front door opened, and Salvatore returned. His expression was thunderous, all trace of the earlier compromise gone. "We need to go," he said curtly. "Now." I grabbed my bags, shooting Jen a quick goodbye hug. "I'll call you tomorrow," I promised. She nodded, her eyes conveying what her words couldn't. Be careful. Salvatore's hand settled at the small of my back as he guided me down the stairs, the touch light but unmistakably possessive. In the car, he remained silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Is everything okay?" I ventured after several minutes. "No," he replied tersely. Then, with visible effort, he softened his tone. "But it doesn't concern you." We drove not to his mansion, but to a high-rise overlooking the lake, a sleek glass tower with a uniformed doorman who hurried to open my door. "My city residence," Salvatore explained as we entered a private elevator requiring both a key card and fingerprint recognition. "Isabella is already here. We'll return to the main house tomorrow." The elevator opened directly into a stunning penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of the lake and city skyline. The decor was minimalist but luxurious, everything in shades of white, gray, and black. A woman I recognized as Isabella's nurse appeared from a hallway. "She's asleep, Mr. Russo." The excitement of coming to the city apartment tired her out. Salvatore nodded. "Thank you, Sophia. You're dismissed for the evening." After she left, he turned to me. "I'll show you to your room. Tomorrow we'll discuss your duties in detail." He led me down a hallway to a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, with an ensuite bathroom featuring a shower big enough for 4 people and a soaking tub beside yet another window with that spectacular view. "Everything you need should be here," he said, gesturing to the bathroom. "If not, use the house phone to request it." I set my bags down awkwardly. "Thank you." He remained in the doorway, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You should know something, Eleanor. I don't usually allow people into my private residences. Few have seen this apartment who don't work directly for me." "Why me, then?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "Why go to all this trouble for someone who just happened to find your daughter on the street?" He was silent for a long moment. "Because you did what no one else would have done. In a neighborhood where people mind their own business to survive, you stop to help a child you didn't know. That kind of integrity is rare in my world." Before I could respond, he added, "And because Isabella hasn't stopped talking about her guardian angel since she woke up. My daughter's happiness is everything to me." There was such naked truth in that last statement that I found myself believing him completely, perhaps for the first time. "Get some rest," he said, his usual commanding tone returning. "Tomorrow will be a full day." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "What happened on your phone call earlier?" He paused, his back to me. "Someone made a miscalculation," he said finally. "It's being corrected." The ominous phrasing sent a chill through me. "Is Isabella in danger? Is that why we came here instead of the house?" He turned back, his expression unreadable. "My daughter is always potentially in danger, Eleanor. It's the price of being mine." His eyes held mine. "As you may discover yourself." With that cryptic statement, he left, closing the door behind him. I sat on the edge of the enormous bed, the events of the day crashing over me like waves. Less than 48 hours ago, I'd been a waitress worrying about making rent. Now I was in the penthouse of one of Chicago's most feared men, hired to care for his daughter, drawn into his orbit by a simple act of kindness that had somehow upended my entire existence. As I stared out at the glittering city below, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now caught in a current far stronger than I could swim against, being pulled deeper into waters where predators lurked just beneath the glittering surface. And Salvatore Russo, with his dark eyes and dangerous presence, was the most formidable predator of all. I woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows I didn't recognize. For a moment, panic gripped me before memories of the previous night flooded back. Salvatore, the penthouse, my new life. The digital clock on the nightstand read 6:47. I'd slept deeply despite my anxiety, the luxurious mattress enveloping me like a cloud. I showered quickly in the enormous bathroom, marveling at the array of expensive toiletries lined up for my use, then faced the dilemma of what to wear. My waitress clothes seemed woefully inappropriate, but I hadn't packed much else. A soft knock interrupted my deliberation. "Yes?" I called, clutching my towel tighter. "Good morning, Miss Walsh." A woman's voice, not Sophia's. "Mr. Russo asked me to bring you suitable attire for today's activities." I opened the door to find a petite woman in a crisp black suit holding several garment bags. She stepped past me efficiently, hanging them in the closet. "I'm Natalia, Mr. Russo's personal assistant," she said, assessing me with a cool gaze. "I've brought options based on your measurements. The blue would be appropriate for today's ballet outing." "My measurements?" I echoed. "How did you?" "Mr. Russo is thorough," she replied, as if this explained everything. "Breakfast will be served in 20 minutes. Isabella is looking forward to seeing you." With that, she took off, leaving me just standing there, staring at the garment bags. Inside the one she'd pointed out, I found a simple but really elegant blue dress that probably cost more than what I paid for rent in a whole month, along with a matching cardigan and a pair of flats. What was even more unnerving was how perfectly everything fit, like someone had taken my measurements while I was sleeping. The main living area looked even more impressive in the daylight. One entire wall was made of glass, showing off Lake Michigan stretching out as far as the eye could see. At a round table near the windows, Isabella was deep in conversation with her father, who was reading something on a tablet while nodding along to her chattering. "Eleanor," Isabella spotted me first, and her face just lit up. "Papa said, you're coming to ballet with me today. Do you dance, too?" "Not ballet," I admitted, smiling at how enthusiastic she was. "I'm not very graceful. I can teach you. Miss Lavina says I'm the best in my class, even though I'm the youngest." Salvatore looked up, his eyes quickly scanning me, taking everything in. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, but his tie was loosened, and the top button of his shirt was undone, just a small allowance for the early hour. "The dress suits you," he said, putting down his tablet. "Sit, eat." It wasn't really an invitation, more like an order. I took the empty seat, very aware of him sitting across the table. A housekeeper I hadn't met before appeared silently, putting a plate in front of me. It was some kind of egg white omelet with vegetables and a side of fresh fruit. "Isabella has been explaining her ballet routine," Salvatore continued, his attention divided between me and whatever he was reading on his tablet. "You'll need to make sure she eats exactly 1 hour before class, then check her glucose levels right before and after." "I made a chart," Isabella said proudly, sliding a piece of paper toward me. It was covered in colorful drawings of food with numbers next to them. "These are the snacks I can have and how many carbs they have. Papa says you need to know because you're my new medical person." I looked at the chart, impressed by how well she understood her condition at such a young age. "This is very helpful. Thank you, Isabella." "You can call me Izzy," she said, then glanced at her father. "But only when Papa's not around. He doesn't like nicknames." Salvatore's mouth twitched slightly. "Eat your breakfast, Isabella." She went back to her food obediently, but not before giving me a conspiratorial wink that warmed something inside me. The omelet was delicious, made with ingredients I probably couldn't even name. I ate quietly, listening to Isabella's cheerful chatter about her ballet friends and the upcoming recital. Salvatore asked a question or made a comment every now and then, but he mostly seemed absorbed in whatever he was reading. "Dr. Michaels will meet you at the ballet studio," he said abruptly, looking up at me. "He'll go over Isabella's medical protocols and answer any questions you have. Sophia will be with you too, but her main job is security, not medical." "Security?" I repeated, stopping with my fork halfway to my mouth. "Yes." His tone didn't leave any room for more questions on that subject. "After ballet, you'll come back here. Isabella has tutoring this afternoon while you and I talk about the details of your job." "Can't Eleanor come to my math lesson?" Isabella asked, pushing her empty plate away. "Mr. Peterson is so boring." "Your education isn't supposed to be entertaining," Salvatore replied, though his tone was gentle. and Eleanor and I have business to discuss." Isabella sighed dramatically, but didn't argue any further. She was a child used to her father's decisions being final. Salvatore checked his watch and stood up. "I have meetings this morning. Natalia will give you both phones before you leave. Secure devices with the right contacts already programmed in." He briefly rested his hand on Isabella's head, a surprisingly tender gesture. "Behave for Miss Lavina today, I will, Papa." He turned to me, his expression hardening back into the controlled mask I was starting to recognize as his public face. "My driver will take you. Stay with Sophia and Isabella at all times. If anything seems out of the ordinary, if anyone is watching too closely, approaching without a reason, or if any situation makes you feel uncomfortable, tell Sophia right away." The seriousness of his tone sent a chill through me. "Is there something specific I should be worried about?" His jaw tightened. "Just standard precautions." But I didn't believe him. Something had changed since the night before. The same thing that had made us move so suddenly to this penthouse instead of the mansion. He started toward the elevator, then stopped and turned back. "One more thing, Eleanor. The dress you're wearing cost $4,000. Try not to get it dirty." My jaw dropped as he disappeared into the elevator. $4,000 for a simple blue dress? I could have paid almost 4 months' rent with that money. "Papa likes to buy pretty things," Isabella said, watching my expression with amusement. "He got me 7 pairs of ballet shoes last month, and Miss Lavina said I only needed one." The ballet studio was on the top floor of a renovated warehouse in a fancy neighborhood. The driver, a stone-faced man who had only been introduced as Anton, escorted us from the car to the entrance like a Secret Service agent, his eyes constantly scanning everything around us. Sophia, who I'd now been formally introduced to, walked right beside Isabella, her hand resting casually near her purse, where I was pretty sure she had a weapon. Even though she was wearing a nurse's scrubs and was so gentle with Isabella, everything about the way she moved screamed, security professional. Inside, the studio was a beautiful space with gleaming hardwood floors and mirrored walls. About a dozen girls Isabella's age were already stretching at the bar, watched over by a stern-looking woman who I figured was Miss Lavina. "Isabella," the instructor called, her Russian accent very noticeable. "You are almost late. Quickly now." Isabella hurried off to join her classmates after giving me a quick hug around my waist. I stood awkwardly with Sophia at the back of the room, where a few other caretakers, nannies, mothers, and one father were sitting and watching. "Dr. Michaels will be here soon," Sophia murmured, leading me to some empty chairs in the corner. "We sit here with the wall at our backs and a clear view of all the entrances." The tactical thinking behind her choice of seats just confirmed my suspicions about what she really did. "You're not actually a nurse, are you?" Her lips curved into a slight smile. "I have medical training, but no, nursing isn't my main job." "You're her bodyguard." "One of several," she corrected. "The only female one, which is why I have the most direct contact." I watched Isabella doing a perfect ply, her small face serious with concentration. "Is she in real danger? Or is Salvatore just paranoid?" Sophia's expression hardened. "Mr. Russo has a lot of enemies. Isabella is his only weak spot, and they know it." She looked at me with a new intensity. "You will be, too, if you're seen as important to him." Before I could really process that disturbing thought, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s walked into the studio, nodded to Sophia, and then took the seat next to me. "Miss Walsh," he said, offering his hand. "Dr. Edward Michaels. We met briefly the night you found Isabella, but you might not remember with everything that was going on." "I remember," I said, shaking his hand. He was the one who had given Isabella the glucose injection that had revived her. "I understand you're studying nursing," he continued, opening a leather portfolio. "That gives us a good starting point. Isabella has type 1 diabetes, diagnosed when she was 4. Her condition is usually well managed, but she's at a difficult age, active, sometimes forgets to monitor her levels, and prone to growth spurts that can affect how much insulin she needs." For the next half hour, he walked me through Isabella's specific medical history, treatment plans, and the warning signs of problems. It was thorough and professional. Exactly what any good pediatric endocrinologist would do for a patient's caregiver. Mr. Russo mentioned you're affiliated with Northwestern, I said when he was done. Yes. I head the pediatric endocrinology department. He closed his portfolio. Though my work with Isabella is private, off the books, I clarified. He looked me right in the eye. Miss Walsh, I've been treating Isabella since she was diagnosed. Mr. Russo values discretion, yes, but my main concern is my patient's well-being. I keep all the right medical records. They're just not entered into systems that could be accessed by people who might want to harm the family. The explanation made sense from a medical point of view, but the underlying fact that Isabella's medical care had to be handled like a state secret just showed how dangerous her father's world really was. After ballet class ended, Isabella came bouncing over, her face red from working hard. Did you see my arabesque? Miss Lavina said it was perfect. It was beautiful, I told her, helping her change her shoes. How are you feeling? Any dizziness or weakness? She shook her head. I'm hungry, though. Let's check your levels first, I said, pulling out the glucose monitor Dr. Michaels had given me. Isabella held out her finger with practiced patience, barely even flinching when I pricked it. The reading showed her glucose levels were a little below normal, not dangerous yet, but getting there. Time for a snack, I announced, reaching for the small cooler Sophia had brought. Inside were carefully portioned snacks, each with its carbohydrate count labeled. I want the apple and peanut butter, Isabella decided. As she ate, I noticed Sophia and Anton talking quietly by the door, their expressions tense. Dr. Michaels had also moved closer to Isabella, his casual attitude hiding the alertness in his eyes. Is something wrong? I asked Sophia when she came back. Change of plans, she said calmly, but I could hear a hint of tension in her voice. We're going straight to the main house, not back to the penthouse. Why? I watched Isabella chatting happily with Dr. Michaels, not noticing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Sophia's voice dropped. Mr. Russo's orders. The car is waiting. The ride back felt different. Anton took a roundabout route, checking his mirrors frequently. A second vehicle, a black sedan I hadn't seen before, followed us at a distance. Sophia kept Isabella busy with a game on her tablet, but her eyes were constantly scanning the traffic around us. When we finally got to Salvatore's mansion, the gates opened right away for us and closed just as quickly behind us. Two security men I recognized from my previous visit were standing at attention at the front entrance. Papa, Isabella called, running toward Salvatore as he came out of the house. He caught her in a tight hug, lifting her off the ground. How was ballet, Piccolamia? He asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Amazing. Elelainer watched the whole time, and she said my arabesque was beautiful. His eyes met mine over Isabella's head. Did she? I nodded, feeling strangely like I'd passed some kind of test. Isabella, go with Sophia to wash up for lunch, he instructed, setting his daughter down. Elelainer and I need to talk. Once Isabella had gone inside, Salvatore's expression changed completely. The tender father vanished, replaced by the hard-eyed man I'd seen the night before. Come to my study, he said curtly, leading the way through the mansion's luxurious interior. His study here was bigger than the one at the penthouse, lined with leather-bound books and dominated by an antique desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. A fire was burning in a massive stone fireplace, even though it was a mild day outside. Sit, he instructed, closing the door behind us. I sat on one of two leather chairs facing his desk. What's going on? Sophia said there was a change of plans, and the security seems tighter. He stayed standing, pacing slightly. There was an incident last night. Nothing that directly threatens Isabella, but it's a precaution nonetheless. What kind of incident? I pressed. His jaw tightened. The kind that doesn't concern you. It does if it affects Isabella's safety, I countered. Or mine. He stopped pacing, looking at me intently. You're right, he said after a moment, surprising me. You've gotten involved with my family, so you deserve certain truths. He went to a cabinet, taking out a crystal decanter. Drink? I shook my head. He poured himself a small amount of amber liquid, swirling it thoughtfully. A business associate tried to renegotiate terms yesterday by using information about my movements. This associate has been reminded of the importance of loyalty. His eyes met mine. The reminder wasn't gentle. A chill went down my spine at what he was implying. And that's why we moved from the penthouse to here? In case this person knew where you lived? The penthouse isn't a secret, he replied. This property, however, has certain advantages when it comes to security. We're on 10 acres with a perimeter monitored by both people and electronic systems. No one gets close without me knowing. I swallowed hard. Is this normal? Moving houses because of threats? No, he admitted. But I'm being cautious. Isabella has already become attached to you, and I won't risk either of you. The casual way he included me in his protection both warmed and terrified me. Salvatore, I began carefully. I agreed to take care of Isabella's health, not to get caught in the middle of whatever this is. There is no middle ground in my world, Eleanor, he said, his voice hardening. You're either under my protection or you're not. There is no halfway. The full weight of my decision crashed down on me. I had stepped into his world, and it was much more intense than I had imagined. Now, he said, his tone changing to something more businesslike. About your employment. He opened a drawer and took out a folder. Your contract, as requested, salary, benefits, confidentiality clauses. Everything is clearly outlined. I took the document with trembling fingers. The salary made me blink twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. It was more than 5 times what I'd made at the diner. This is excessive, I murmured. It's appropriate compensation for the position and its unique requirements. He leaned against the desk, watching me scan the pages. Your tuition will be paid directly to the university. A car will be available for you to use when you need it. Your 1 day off per week is included, as you asked for. The thoroughness was impressive. The terms were more generous than I could have imagined. But as I flipped through the detailed document, I couldn't help feeling like I was signing away more than just my time. One thing isn't addressed, I said, looking up at him. You mentioned yesterday that if I ever felt unsafe, the threat would be eliminated. What exactly does that mean? His expression didn't change. It means exactly what I said. Anyone who threatens someone under my protection faces consequences. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, I insisted. Then we agree on that, he replied smoothly. Because I don't want you hurt at all. The intensity in his eyes made my cheeks feel hot. I looked back at the contract, trying to focus. The clothing, I said suddenly. This morning, Natalia mentioned you had my measurements and this dress. I gestured to the blue dress I was still wearing. $4,000 is excessive for work clothes. A hint of amusement touched his face. Isabella's previous caretakers dressed accordingly. Your appearance reflects on my family. But how did you get my measurements overnight? I have resources, he said simply. Does it not fit to your liking? That's not the point, I said, flustered. It feels invasive. He thought about this, tilting his head slightly. I don't see efficiency as invasion, Eleanor. But I understand your point of view. In the future, Natalia will ask you before ordering anything. Would that be acceptable? The concession, small as it was, surprised me. I nodded. Good, he said, straightening up. Sign the contract, and we'll consider the matter settled. I hesitated, my pen hovering over the signature line. And if I change my mind later, if this becomes too much? His expression darkened. Do you plan to abandon Isabella after she's become attached to you? No, of course not. But this world, your world, it's more complicated than I realized. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. Few things worth having come without complications, Eleanor. Something in his tone made me look up, catching an expression in his eyes that I couldn't quite figure out. Something beyond the cool authority he usually showed. For a moment I saw vulnerability beneath the power. A man used to controlling everything except maybe his own heart where his daughter was concerned, and now possibly where I was concerned too. The realization sent a jolt through me. I signed quickly before I could second-guess myself anymore. "Excellent," he said, taking the contract and putting it back on his desk. "Now, about your living arrangements. Your room here is next to Isabella's suite. Sophia stays in the room connected on her other side when she's on duty. My things are being collected from my apartment this afternoon," he finished for me. "I've assigned people to pack and transport everything. They'll be respectful of your privacy." The thought of strangers handling my stuff made me uncomfortable. But I'd already given up so much control that this seemed like a small thing to argue about. "Isabella has tutoring until 3, he continued. "I suggest you use that time to get familiar with the house, especially the security protocols. Carlos," he nodded toward the door, where I assumed a security man was waiting outside, "will show you the grounds and explain the systems you need to understand." It all felt overwhelming: the contract, the house, the dangers lurking just out of sight in this new life I'd chosen. "Any questions?" he asked, watching me closely. "Just one," I said, finding my voice. "The man who tried to use information about you, what happened to him?" Something cold flickered in Salvatore's eyes. "He's reconsidering his poor choices from a hospital bed." He stepped closer until I could smell his cologne, that same subtle, expensive scent I'd noticed in his car. "I protect what's mine, Eleanor. Remember that." The possessive way he said it sent a shiver down my spine, and it wasn't all from fear. "Isabella is waiting for lunch," he said abruptly, switching back to being practical. "After your tour of the grounds, join her in the sunroom. She's excited to show you her science projects." As I followed him from the study, I caught a glimpse of myself in a gilded mirror, the expensive blue dress, my hair neatly styled, looking every bit the polished professional I'd never had the money to become. But beneath that surface, I saw the truth in my own eyes. I was in deeper than I'd ever meant to be, drawn into Salvatore Russo's world by forces I didn't fully understand. And somewhere between fear and fascination, I was starting to lose sight of where his world ended and my own began. 3 weeks went by in a whirlwind of new routines. Every morning started with checking Isabella's glucose levels, then breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, often just the two of us, since Salvatore usually left for business before dawn. Afternoons were filled with Isabella's various activities: ballet 3 times a week, piano lessons, tutoring, and the occasional playdate with friends who had been carefully screened. I'd settled into a rhythm, learning the complicated dance of living in Salvatore's world. The mansion staff, a mix of household employees and security people in disguise, had accepted me with professional courtesy, if not warmth. Sophia had become something of an ally, teaching me the unwritten rules of the house and sometimes sharing little insights into Salvatore's complex personality. "He trusts you with Isabella," she told me one evening as we watched the little girl practice piano. "That's rare." The last tutor only lasted 3 days before he decided she was watching his daughter too closely, like she was memorizing details for someone else. The constant paranoia should have been suffocating. But somehow it had become normal, checking rooms before going in, never answering the door myself, reporting any unusual cars or people near the property. The mansion itself was a fortress pretending to be a luxury home, with security features I was only starting to understand. As for Salvatore himself, he remained a mystery. Sometimes he'd be gone for days, other times he'd show up unexpectedly to have dinner or watch a movie with Isabella and me. Around his daughter, he was attentive and surprisingly gentle. Around me, he kept a careful distance. Our conversations were limited to talk about Isabella's care or brief, intense moments that left me confused about the strange tension building between us. Tonight was my weekly day off, the one thing I'd insisted on when I took the job. I'd spent the afternoon with Jen in her new apartment, amazed at how quickly our lives had changed. Her place in Riverfront was sleek and modern, with things my old apartment building couldn't even imagine having. "You look different," Jen had said over wine. "More polished, like you fit into his world now." I'd laughed it off. But later, as my driver took me back to the mansion, Salvatore had insisted on providing transportation. Even on my day off, I found myself studying my reflection in the car window. My hair was styled in a way I'd never been able to do before, My clothes were designer brands I'd only ever seen in magazines, and I had a confidence in my posture that hadn't been there a month ago. The car slowed down as we approached the mansion gates. The security scan was completed automatically. Something felt different tonight. There were more vehicles than usual parked in the circular driveway, and lights were blazing from windows that were usually dark. "What's happening?" I asked the driver. "Mr. Russo has associates visiting," he replied, his tone neutral. "You might want to enter through the side entrance." He wasn't being subtle. "Stay out of sight, away from Salvatore's business guests." I had planned to go straight to my room anyway, tired from being out all day and looking forward to a hot bath in my fancy private bathroom. Still, I was curious as I slipped through the side door, noticing the increased security presence throughout the house. I'd almost reached the staircase when I heard Isabella's voice, high and upset, coming from Salvatore's study, a room she was hardly ever allowed to go into. "But Papa, she promised to read me the next chapter tonight." "Isabella." Salvatore's voice was gentle but firm. "I've explained that Elena has the evening to herself. You'll see her in the morning. It's not fair. She's been gone all day." I hesitated, torn between respecting Salvatore's authority and comforting the clearly upset child who had become so important to me. Before I could decide, the study door opened and Isabella came rushing out, almost running into me in the hallway. "Eleanor." Her face lit up, and she wrapped her arms around my waist. "You came back early." "I'm right on schedule, actually," I said, smoothing her hair. "What's got you so upset, sweetheart?" Salvatore appeared in the doorway behind her, and I felt my breath catch. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit with a burgundy tie, his hair combed back, and the scar along his jaw seemed more noticeable in the hallway lighting. He looked intimidating, powerful, and annoyed at the interruption. "Isabella," he said, his tone a warning. "I told you Elena needs her privacy on her day off." "It's okay," I assured him, surprising myself with how easily I now contradicted the man who had once terrified me. "I don't mind reading her a chapter before bed." His eyes narrowed slightly, but before a voice, deep and accented, echoed from the study. "Salvatore, we need to conclude this discussion. Time is pressing." Isabella's grip tightened on me. I had never witnessed her displaying fear before, but that voice clearly affected her. Salvatore took notice as well. His expression softened as he knelt to Isabella's height. "Go with Eleanor Piccolamia. I'll come and say good night when I'm finished." She nodded, pressing closer to me. As Salvatore straightened, our eyes met over her head, and a silent communication passed between us. Concern for Isabella? Yes, but also something more complex. "Your guests," I began quietly. "Will be gone soon," he finished, his voice equally low. "Take her upstairs, please." It wasn't until we reached Isabella's room that I felt her relax, her small body finally losing its tension. "I don't like Uncle Victor," she confided as I helped her into her pajamas. "He smells like cigars and looks at me funny." "Is that who's visiting your father?" I asked casually, trying to mask my interest. She nodded, climbing into her canopy bed. "Him and some other men. They come sometimes, and Papa always makes me stay upstairs when they're here." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Sophia says they're business partners, but I heard Marco tell Carlos they're from the old country and very dangerous." Marco was Salvatore's head of security, Carlos his second in command. The fact that they discussed such things where Isabella might overhear bothered me. "Well, your father would never let anyone dangerous near you," I assured her, pulling her favorite book from the nightstand. "Now, where did we leave off? Was the princess about to enter the enchanted forest?" She settled against her pillows, her earlier distress forgotten as I began reading. By the third page, her eyelids were drooping. By the fifth, she was asleep. I marked our place and tucked the blankets around her, brushing a kiss across her forehead, a gesture that had become natural over the weeks. As I turned to leave, I found Salvatore standing in the doorway, watching us with an inscrutable expression. She was exhausted. I whispered, moving past him into the hallway. He closed Isabella's door quietly, then remained standing closer than was strictly necessary, his cologne enveloping me. Sandalwood and something else I could never quite identify. "You didn't have to come back tonight," he said. "Your contract guarantees you a full 24 hours. "I wanted to come home," I replied, the word home slipping out before I could catch it. Besides, she was expecting me for her bedtime story. Something flickered in his eyes at my use of home. "You've been good for her," he said after a moment. "She's more balanced with you here, less anxious. Children need consistency." "I imagine that's difficult in your line of work," I said. His jaw tightened. "Isabella has everything she needs except normalcy," I countered. "She overheard your security men talking about your dangerous visitors tonight." Anger flashed across his features. "Who? That's not the point, Salvatore. The point is, she's absorbing more than you realize about your world. She's afraid of your associate, Victor. Though she can't articulate why she should be afraid of him," he muttered, then shook his head. "I'll speak with Marco about discretion around Isabella." I nodded, suddenly aware of how tired I was. I should get to bed, too. "Wait." His hand caught my arm, the touch sending warmth through me despite the thin fabric of my blouse. "I need to discuss something with you. Come to my study after I've concluded this meeting." "Is everything okay?" "Isabella's health is fine," he assured me. "This is about other matters. Give me 30 minutes. The request or command with Salvatore, it was hard to distinguish, left me curious and uneasy. In the 3 weeks I'd worked for him, he'd never summoned me to his study late at night. In my room, I changed from my day clothes into more comfortable attire, leggings and an oversized sweater that had somehow survived Natalia's wardrobe purges. I checked on Isabella one more time, finding her still peacefully asleep, then made my way back downstairs. The mansion was quiet now, the visitors apparently gone. I knocked softly on the study door. "Enter," Salvatore called. He stood by the fireplace, jacket removed, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal powerful forearms, and the edge of what I now knew was a family crest tattooed on his right wrist. He'd loosened his tie and held a glass of what looked like whiskey, his posture suggesting fatigue beneath the ever-present authority. "You wanted to see me," I said, remaining near the door. "Sit, please." He gestured to the leather sofa near the fire rather than the formal chairs before his desk, a more intimate setting that made my pulse quicken slightly. I perched on the edge of the sofa. He remained standing, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I'll be traveling to Italy next week," he said without preamble. "Business that can't be handled remotely. I'll be gone approximately 10 days. I nodded, uncertain why this required a private meeting. He'd traveled twice already during my employment, though never for so long. "I want you and Isabella to come with me," he continued, watching my reaction closely. "To Italy?" I blinked in surprise. "But her school, her routine, arrangements have been made with her teachers. The villa has secure grounds where her routine can continue relatively undisturbed." He set down his glass. "She's never seen her ancestral home. I think it's time. And you need me because of her diabetes management," I concluded. "That's one reason," he agreed, his eyes never leaving mine. "But not the only one." Something in his tone made my heartbeat accelerate. "What are the others?" He moved to sit beside me on the sofa, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Isabella trusts you completely. Having you there will make the transition easier for her." "And?" I prompted, sensing he was holding something back. He was silent for a moment, studying me with that penetrating gaze that always made me feel like he could see straight through my defenses. "The men who were here tonight represent certain traditional elements in my organization," he said finally. "They have specific ideas about family succession, appearances, proper roles. They're pressuring me to formalize arrangements they believe are overdue." I frowned, not following. "What kind of arrangements?" "A marriage alliance," he said bluntly, "with the daughter of an associate in Sicily. It would strengthen certain business ties and satisfy traditional expectations." The revelation hit me with unexpected force, a hollow feeling opening in my stomach. "Oh," was all I managed. "I have no interest in their arrangement," he continued, his voice hardening. "But appearances matter in my position. Bringing you and Isabella, presenting us as a family unit, sends a message that would end these discussions permanently." I stood abruptly, needing distance from his overwhelming presence. "You want me to pretend to be... what exactly? Your girlfriend? Your wife? I want you to be exactly what you are. An intelligent, capable woman who cares for my daughter and has earned my trust." He rose as well, moving to stand before me. "The rest they will assume based on your presence at my side. Using me as a shield against an unwanted marriage," I clarified, unexpected hurt making my tone sharper than intended. His expression darkened. "Is that how you see it? How else should I see it?" "Perhaps as an opportunity," he countered. "To see Italy, to experience the culture, to further solidify your position in Isabella's life, or perhaps as a step further into a world I never intended to enter," I replied. "When I agreed to care for Isabella's health, I didn't sign up to be paraded as your whatever they'll assume I am." He stepped closer until barely inches separated us. "And what would be so objectionable about those assumptions, Eleanor?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us had dared voice during these weeks of growing tension. My heart hammered against my ribs as I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Nothing," I admitted quietly. "Except that they wouldn't be true, wouldn't they?" His voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. "Are you certain?" I wasn't certain. Not at all. Somewhere between fearing this man and working in his home, between caring for his daughter and observing his complex nature, something had shifted. The magnetic pull I'd felt from the beginning had transformed into something deeper. An understanding, a connection I couldn't easily define. "I don't know what game you're playing," I said finally. "No game." His hand rose to my face, fingers brushing my cheek with surprising gentleness. "Only truth, Eleanor. Since the night you found Isabella, you've seen parts of me no one else has been allowed to see. The father beyond the reputation. The man beneath the power. I've seen a man who lives in constant vigilance," I countered, "who surrounds himself with guards and weapons and never lets his guard down. Until now," he said softly. "Until you." Before I could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it with a frown, then stepped back. The intimate moment shattered. "Security alert," he explained tersely. "Wait here." He strode from the study, leaving me breathless and confused. Through the open door, I could hear curt commands being given, footsteps moving rapidly across the marble floors. Something was happening. Something that had transformed Salvatore from the almost vulnerable man of moments ago back to the hardened figure I'd first encountered. Against my better judgment, I moved to the doorway, peering into the foyer where Salvatore stood surrounded by security personnel. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments. "Perimeter breach, southeast corner armed." Fear gripped me. Isabella was upstairs, sleeping peacefully, unaware of whatever threat had triggered this response. I turned, intending to go to her, when Salvatore's voice rang out. "Eleanor, stay exactly where you are." He crossed to me in 4 long strides, his expression grim. "We have unwelcome visitors. Marco is handling it, but I need you to stay in this room until I say otherwise." "Isabella, is Sophia with her?" He finished. "2 more men are stationed outside her door. She's secure." "What's happening?" I demanded, fear making my voice shake. "A message is being delivered," he replied cryptically. "One I should have anticipated after today's meeting." Understanding dawned. "This is related to your visitors. The marriage alliance you rejected." His jaw tightened. "Some people don't accept no for an answer." From somewhere outside came the sound of what might have been a muffled gunshot. I flinched, but Salvatore's expression didn't change. "Stay here," he repeated more forcefully this time. "Lock the door behind me. Open it only for me or Marco." Before I could respond, he pulled a small handgun from beneath his shirt, a weapon I hadn't realized he was carrying, and checked it with practiced efficiency. Salvatore. I began, panic rising. It will be fine, he assured me, his voice gentling despite the steel in his eyes. This is business as usual. Nothing I haven't handled before. The casual way he referred to armed intruders as business as usual should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself reaching for his free hand, squeezing it tightly. Be careful, I whispered. Something flashed in his eyes, surprised perhaps at my concern. Then he leaned forward, pressing his lips briefly, fiercely against mine. Before I could react, he was gone, pulling the door closed behind him. I locked it with trembling hands, then sank onto the sofa, mind racing. The kiss had been so quick, so unexpected, yet it had sent electricity coursing through me. But there was no time to process that now, not with whatever danger lurked outside. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Occasionally, I heard voices or movement, but nothing that revealed what was happening. I checked my phone for any messages from Sophia about Isabella, but the screen remained blank. Finally, a soft knock at the door made me jump. Eleanor, Salvatore's voice called. I unlocked the door with shaking fingers. He stood alone in the hallway, his white shirt now stained with what looked disturbingly like blood spatter. The gun was gone, but his expression remained hard, his eyes cold in a way I hadn't seen before. Are you hurt? I gasped, reaching toward the stains. Not my blood, he said quietly, catching my hand before I could touch him. The situation is contained. Isabella is still sleeping. You're safe. The simple declaration, "You're safe," carried weight beyond the obvious. It wasn't just physical safety he was assuring me of, but something deeper, a promise. What happened? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Victor's associates attempted to deliver a message. His jaw clenched. I replied more emphatically. The clinical way he described what had clearly been violence should have repulsed me. Instead, I found myself understanding on some primal level. He had protected his home, his daughter, me. They won't return? I asked. No. The single word carried finality. But this confirms we should leave for Italy sooner rather than later. We'll go tomorrow. Tomorrow? I echoed. But I'm not prepared. I need to. Everything you need will be provided. He cut me off. Pack whatever personal items you value. The rest can be purchased in Milan. The high-handed manner would have irritated me weeks ago. Now I recognized it as his response to perceived threat. Taking control, eliminating variables, protecting what was his. And somehow I had become included in that category. I need to shower, he said, glancing down at his stained shirt with distaste. Then we'll talk further. He turned to go, but I caught his arm. Salvatore. The kiss was overdue, he finished, his expression softening slightly. But perhaps poorly timed. Perhaps. I agreed, a small smile escaping despite the tension of the moment. He studied me for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, you were terrified of me. I still am sometimes, I admitted. But I've seen more now. The father who reads bedtime stories. The man who remembers how I take my coffee. The protector who would do anything to keep his daughter safe. And you? He asked, his voice dropping. Would you do anything to keep you safe as well? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. 3 weeks ago, I would have assumed he saw me as an employee, useful for Isabella's care, but ultimately expendable. Now, looking into his eyes, I saw something else entirely. Something possessive, fierce, and undeniably genuine. Yes, I whispered. I think you would. His hand rose to cup my cheek, thumb tracing my lower lip. Come to Italy, Eleanor. Not as my shield or my employee, as something more. What exactly? I pressed, needing clarity despite the hypnotic effect of his touch. Mine, he said simply. In whatever way you're willing to be. The possessiveness of the word should have offended my independent nature. Instead, it sent warmth coursing through me. Not submission, but belonging, a mutual claiming. I need to check on Isabella first, I said, not quite answering. And you need that shower. A faint smile touched his lips. Practical as always. One of us needs to be, I replied, matching his smile with my own. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as our private jet lifted off from Chicago. Isabella slept peacefully across from us, exhausted from the whirlwind of preparation for our sudden departure. Sophia sat further back, maintaining a discreet distance while never taking her eyes off her charge. Beside me, Salvatore worked quietly on his tablet, occasionally making calls in rapid Italian. The events of the night before seemed to have been compartmentalized. Violence tucked away, business continuing, plans advancing. Yet something fundamental had changed between us. His hand rested casually on mine during takeoff. His body angled protectively toward me when the flight attendant approached, his eyes finding mine with newfound openness. "You never actually said yes," he observed quietly after ending a call. "To Italy. I'm on the plane, aren't I? To being mine," he clarified, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I looked at Isabella, sleeping peacefully with complete trust in her father's ability to keep her safe. I thought of the blood on his shirt last night, the unseen violence he was capable of, the dangerous world he inhabited. I thought of the gentle way he brushed his daughter's hair from her forehead, the respect with which he treated my boundaries despite his habitual command of everything around him. "Your world frightens me," I admitted. The violence, the constant vigilance, the enemies lurking in the shadows. His expression tightened. "I understand but you don't frighten me anymore," I continued, cutting him off. "Neither does the idea of being yours. What scares me is how quickly that became something I wanted." His eyes darkened with an emotion I was only beginning to recognize. "And now I'm flying to Italy with the most dangerous man I've ever met," I said, turning my hand beneath his so our palms pressed together. "A man I've watched murder for his daughter's safety. A man who kisses like he's claiming territory. And yet you're still here," he observed, fingers interlacing with mine. "Yes," I agreed softly. "I'm still here." Isabella stirred across from us, her eyes blinking open sleepily. "Are we in Italy yet?" She mumbled. "Not yet, Piccolamia," Salvatore answered, his tone gentle. "Many hours still to fly." She yawned, gaze moving between us, settling on our clasped hands. A smile bloomed across her face, knowing, pleased, unsurprised. "I told Sophia you were going to be my new mama," she announced with a child's directness. "She said I shouldn't say that, but I knew. Papa looks at you the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my book." Heat rushed to my cheeks as Salvatore chuckled beside me, a rich, genuine sound I'd rarely heard from him. "Isabella," he admonished gently, "remember our discussion about patience?" She sighed dramatically. "Good things come to those who wait," she recited. "But Papa, I've been waiting forever for you to kiss Eleanor." This time, my blush was matched by a rare hint of color on Salvatore's cheeks. Behind us, Sophia suppressed what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "Perhaps we should discuss this later," he suggested, but his hand remained firmly entwined with mine. Isabella shrugged, already distracted by the tablet Salvatore handed her with her favorite games. As she settled back into her seat, her diabetes monitor beeped softly. "Time for a check," I said, reaching for her testing kit with my free hand. Salvatore watched as I performed the now familiar routine, checking Isabella's levels, adjusting her insulin pump, noting the numbers in the tracking app. His eyes held something I'd never seen there before. Not just approval or gratitude, but something deeper, something like peace. "You see why I need you both in Italy," he said quietly as Isabella returned to her game. "This, what we are becoming, is worth protecting, worth changing for." The implication wasn't lost on me. The criminal empire, the violence, the dangerous associates, all aspects of a life he was suggesting might evolve for the sake of what was growing between us. "One step at a time," I cautioned. "Italy first, then we'll see about restructuring your entire existence." He laughed again, the sound warming me from within. As I said, practical. As the plane carried us across the Atlantic, Isabella fell back asleep, and Salvatore eventually dozed beside me, his head tilting onto my shoulder in a rare display of vulnerability. I watched the sunrise from 40,000 feet, marveling at the journey that had brought me here. 1 month ago, I'd been a waitress struggling to make rent, dreaming of a nursing career that seemed forever just beyond reach. Now I was flying to Italy beside a man whose world I'd entered through an act of simple kindness, finding a lost child on a dark street, the dangerous favor that had changed everything. Salvatore stirred beside me, his eyes opening to find mine already watching him. Without a word, he raised our still-clasped hands and pressed a kiss against my wrist just over my pulse. "No regrets," he murmured. I thought of all I'd left behind. The diner, the cramped apartment, the exhaustion of constant financial struggle, and all I'd gained. Not just material comfort, but purpose, connection, and this complicated, dangerous man who looked at me like I was something precious to be protected at all costs. "No regrets," I answered, and sealed the promise with a kiss. Whatever awaited us in Italy, whatever future we would build from this unlikely beginning, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be, in the orbit of Salvatore Russo, no longer afraid of his gravity, but surrendering willingly to its pull.